If you don't listen now, it may be too late. God wants to talk to you today. Have you ever had that strange feeling that something was trying to get your attention, but you ignored it? Maybe it was just a restlessness in your chest, an inexplicable desire to stop everything and reflect. What if I told you that this could have been a call by God? That's right. His voice doesn't always come with thunder or obvious signs. Sometimes it whispers in the midst of chaos, just when you think you're alone. What if this video is just that? A divine wake-up call, a final push before a door closes. There are a lot of people waiting for the right moment to change their lives, make decisions, and move on. But let me tell you something. The right time is now, not tomorrow, not when everything is perfect. Because time, my friend, is a resource that cannot be recycled. And God, oh God, is speaking to you today. Right now. What you will find here is not just an inspiring conversation. It is an urgent call to reflect, choose, change. Let's talk about true faith, the kind that transforms. Let's understand how courage, it's not the absence of fear, but the decision to move forward even with your heart racing. This video could be the beginning of something you never imagined, but that deep down you've always hoped for. Take advantage and subscribe to the channel, activate notifications, and share with that person who you know needs to hear this too. Don't put it off. Life doesn't wait, and neither does God. Those who hear God's call and choose to act do not just change their course, they change their destiny. Now, do the following. Write this sentence in the comments as a public commitment. It shows that you are willing to listen with your heart. Let's go together on this journey of faith, courage, and transformation. Have you ever stopped to think that sometimes what you call a coincidence could actually be a message from heaven? It may seem like an exaggeration, but that's where the danger lies. There are people who spend their whole lives waiting for a clear, spectacular sign with flashing lights and angels singing, and ignore the simple everyday signs that scream, "Hey, God is calling you." You know that restlessness that appears out of nowhere? That discomfort with the routine? That feeling that you're surviving but not living? Well, that's how it is. Called. The divine usually manifests itself in the silence that disturbs, in the solitary tear, in the inexplicable desire to change, to break out of inertia. And ignoring this call, my friend, can be one of the greatest losses someone can face, because God does not call on a whim. He calls because He has something specific for you, something that only you can live, do, and transform. The problem is that most people still think that this calling is something that prophets, pastors, or missionaries do. But let me tell you a truth that perhaps no one has told you clearly. God calls anyone who has a willing heart. It doesn't matter if you have flaws, if you've made mistakes, if you feel small. In fact, the more fragile you feel, the stronger the impact of His presence in your life can be. And what to do when you feel this calling. First step, stop running away. We live running after 1,000 things: success, money, approval. And in the midst of all this rush, we forget to listen. God does not compete with the noise. He waits for your silence. And when you finally stop to listen, it is impossible not to realize He was trying to talk to you the whole time. Maybe right now, as you read this, you are asking yourself, but is this really about me? Yes, it is about you. God uses simple things like this content to reach sincere hearts. If you have come this far, it was not for nothing. He is knocking on the door of your heart and asking, will you listen to me now or when it's too late? That's why urgency is so important. We think we'll always have another chance, another moment, another tomorrow. But tomorrow is not guaranteed, and every time you ignore the call, God's voice becomes more distant. Not because He gives up, but because your heart closes. Faith grows cold, courage fades, and then turning back costs more. So if today you feel this calling burning within you, do not hesitate. This could be the beginning of a journey of faith that will turn your life upside down. And that's a good thing. God doesn't want to take you to a more comfortable place. He wants to take you to a truer, deeper, more transformative place. And it all starts with a simple answer. Yes, Lord, I hear you. The truth is that everyone thinks they have time. We wake up, look at our cell phones, complain about Monday, get lost in our commitments and say, I'll look at it tomorrow. I'll solve it next week. But the problem is that tomorrow is a fragile invention. Time, that silent thing, doesn't tell us when it's going to end. It simply ends. And that's where one of the biggest spiritual mistakes we make comes in. Treating the cold. By go to something that can be postponed. God works in His time, but He works in our now. That is why so many biblical passages carry the urgency of today, of immediate, of get up and walk. Because, my friend, the door that is open now may not be open tomorrow, not as a punishment, but because everything has a cycle, a purpose and a time. And those who hesitate too much run the risk of standing still while life moves on. Think about it. How many times have you felt that inner push to make a decision, ask for forgiveness, give up an addiction, change direction, and you didn't? Do it, and what happened? Time passed, the opportunity cooled, and what seemed so clear at that moment became doubt. That's what delay does to the faith. It wears out, weakens, confuses. That's why the urgency is a recurring theme in Scripture and spiritual messages, not as a frightening alarm, but as a loving warning from a Father who knows that we cannot afford to live waiting. Waiting for what, after all? For everything to be perfect? For you to feel 100% ready? That is not going to happen. Because the ideal time is not when everything is resolved. It is when God calls, and what's more, lost time cannot be recovered. There may even be redemption, yes. God is an expert in rebuilding, but that doesn't mean He will give you back the minutes you wasted with fear, pride, or distraction. Time is like a seed. If you plant it today, you will harvest it tomorrow. But if you keep looking at the field, waiting for the soil to become more fertile, you will miss the season. And then, my friend, all you have to do is wait for a new cycle, which may take a while. Want a practical tip? Start treating time with reverence. That's right. Reverence. Stop saying later as if it were an infinite resource. Write down what you feel you need to do today and ask yourself, if it were my last day, would this still be important? If the answer is yes, then you already know what you have to do. And if it's no, then maybe it's not even worth putting. Off God is a God of opportunity, but He is also a God of movement. He opens doors, but He waits for you to walk through them. And there is no eternal door. They all have a deadline. That is why the call you heard yesterday may not have the same echo tomorrow. The heart changes, the environment changes, even courage changes. Time is too precious to be treated with disregard. Do you know what's really interesting? The more we respect God's timing, the more our time yields. It's as if He puts oil in the gears of the day and everything flows better. But when we ignore this principle, it seems like life stops. So, take advantage of it. If the window has opened now, don't be in doubt. God is saying, this is the moment. And if it is He who is saying it, why wait? Suffering in silence is perhaps one of the loneliest experiences in human existence. That pain that no one sees. The wet pillow at 3 a.m, the forced smile at work, the joke told to disguise despair. It is in this dark territory that many believe God has moved away. But what few realize is that in this very place of anguish, God is closer than ever. There are no wasted tears when you walk in faith. Every pain, every suffering, every loss has weight in the eyes of heaven. It may even seem like He is silent, but make no mistake. God is attentive, present, sensitive to the wounds that the world does not see. Sometimes we are the ones crying. out for help so much that we don't realize that He is already responding, in silence, in comfort, in constant presence. If you've ever felt invisible in your pain, know that you're in good company. Many of the great men and women of the Bible cried alone, felt abandoned, confused, and broken. Elijah, for example, asked to die. Job lost everything. David, the man after God's own heart, wrote entire psalms just talking about his own anguish. And do you know what they discovered? That pain doesn't scare God, it attracts Him. And here's an important point. Pain is not proof of rejection, but an opportunity for closeness. Sometimes God allows pain not to punish you, but to wake you up. Because we tend to listen better when everything falls apart, when the applause stops, when plans fail. That's when called becomes clearer. Not because God speaks louder, but because the rest is silent. Want some practical guidance? Stop running from pain. I'm not saying to embrace it as a good thing, but to stop treating it as an enemy. Pain can be your mentor if you let God interpret it for you. Instead of asking, "Why me?" try asking, "What is the Lord trying to show me through this?" This shift in perspective is what turns suffering into treatment, and not just survival. And don't think that you need to be strong to get closer to God. It is precisely in fragility that His presence manifests itself in a sweeter way. It is when the ground disappears that grace appears as new ground. When everything breaks, He builds it again and better. But this only happens when you understand that you are not alone, even when you feel that way. Suffering, when placed in the right hands, stops being a burden and becomes a bridge. It connects you to heaven. It sharpens your listening skills. It purifies your intentions. And what's more, it prepares you to comfort others, because nothing you've experienced has been in vain. God will use your pain as a tool to heal someone. This is how He transforms trauma into testimony. So the next time pain hits, don't close yourself off. Don't harden your heart. Remember, God sees, God knows, God feels. He didn't turn His face away when you fell. He didn't cover His ears when you cried. He was there, and He still is, just waiting for you to stop fighting alone and choose to trust. You know that moment when everything inside you tells you to stay where you are, not to take risks, to wait a little longer. But at the same time, something deeper insists on pushing you forward. That is the decisive moment. It is the instant when life can continue the same or begin to be transformed. And the difference between one thing and the other is, in a single attitude, the first step of faith. Those who think that faith is about having all the answers are mistaken. Faith, my friend, is walking even when you can't see the ground. It's trusting that God will steady your feet after you move. It's like going through a fog, trusting that there's something prepared on the other side, even if you can't see 2 inches from your nose. And yes, your heart races and your insecurity screams. But that's exactly when faith starts to act. Many people wait to feel the courage to take this step. But here's a revelation. Courage does not come before decision. It is born from it. It is when you choose to move that God begins to strengthen your shaky legs. He does not act in comfort. He acts in movement. The supernatural begins when the natural surrenders. Transformation happens when you move from theory to practice. When you stop thinking and start doing. Maybe you're waiting for a sign from heaven, a direct prophecy, a divine confirmation with a set date and time. But what if what you really need is to stop asking for guarantees and start walking? Remember Peter when he walked on water? He wasn't given a map. He just heard Jesus say, "Come," and he went. His first step wasn't about determination. It was about obedience. And speaking of practice, here is a simple exercise. Think now about an area of your life where you feel that God is calling you to act. It could be a professional decision, a request for forgiveness, a change in attitude. Now ask yourself, what is stopping me from taking this first step? Write it down. Look your fear in the eye, and then sincerely talk to God about it. Because many times what is lacking is not strength, it is clarity. And faith clarifies what logic cannot reach. Don't wait until you feel worthy, ready, or enlightened. The first step of faith is often the most awkward, insecure, and timid, but it is also the most powerful. It is what opens doors, breaks chains, and changes the course of a story. And here is the most beautiful part. God doesn't wait for you to be perfect to act. He acts as you walk. He shapes you in the process, not in stagnation. And if you happen to fall while taking that step, that's okay. God didn't call you to walk without stumbling, but to walk with Him. And falling into His arms is infinitely better than standing still, trusting only in your own strength. The journey of faith is made up of new beginnings. Each attempt, each boldness, each act of courage accumulates like bricks that build the new version of your life. So take a deep breath. Face the doubt and take the step, not because everything is clear, but because God is calling. And when it is He who calls, the ground appears in the way. Is there anything more frustrating than feeling like you're trying to hear God and only finding silence? It seems like everyone has stories of how they heard something from God, but when you try, everything becomes foggy and directionless. The thing is, maybe you're listening with the wrong ears. It's harsh, right? But it's real, because God doesn't always speak loudly. Most of the time, He speaks from the heart. Listening with your heart is not just a pretty metaphor to make you seem spiritual. It is a real, profound, and extremely necessary practice. Do you know why? Because the world is too noisy. There are messages, notifications, commitments, demands. And in the midst of this whirlwind, you need to learn to disconnect from the external noise to tune into the divine frequency. And only the heart can capture this frequency. The heart, in biblical language, is more than an organ that beats in your chest. It is the center of your attention, your intentions, your convictions. And when God speaks to the heart, He touches areas that you didn't even know were dormant. Sometimes it's an annoyance that you can't explain. Sometimes it's a strange peace that comes in the midst of confusion. Other times, it's a random phrase that someone says that seems to have been written just for you. All of these are ways that God communicates. But here comes the point. To listen with your heart, you need to slow down. There is no way to capture the subtle if you live in urgency mode. You cannot perceive the breath of God if you only expect. Lightning. He speaks through subtleties, a snippet of music, a sunset, a casual conversation, a random reading that hits you right in the spirit. The question is not whether God is speaking. It is whether your heart is willing to pay attention. Here's a practical tip. Create moments of intentional silence. Turn everything off. Literally everything. Sit down for 5 minutes with a pen and paper. Take a deep breath and say, Lord, speak to me. Then just observe. Write down whatever comes to mind, even if it seems silly. Over time, you'll find your spiritual sensitivity increases. Listening with the heart is a habit, not a gift reserved for the enlightened. Another important thing, what the heart hears is not always what the mind wants. God doesn't always confirm our plans. Sometimes He says no. Sometimes He is silent so that you can learn to trust. But there is wisdom in that too, because silence also speaks. The problem is that we tend to only hear what we want to hear. And then, when God says something different, we say that He didn't answer. But He did answer. It was just that. We weren't listening with an open heart, and look how interesting. The heart that listens also obeys. Listening with the heart is the first step to truly obeying, because you do not follow out of obligation, but out of connection. And this connection changes everything. It makes faith alive. Make your relationship with God real, practical, vibrant. That's what He wants. For you not only to listen, but feel, understand, and respond. So the next time you want to hear from God, stop expecting the extraordinary and start paying attention to the ordinary. He speaks where you least expect it. But you will only notice if you are listening from the right place. Let's be honest. Few things shake our faith as much as God's silence. It's easy to believe when prayers are answered quickly, when everything flows smoothly, and His presence seems almost palpable. But when we pray, cry out, wait, and all we hear is silence, then things change. Our minds question, our hearts are agitated. Has He abandoned me? That's the doubt that screams in the darkness. But let me tell you a truth that perhaps no one has ever told you clearly. God's silence is not absence, it is strategy. God never remains silent out of disinterest. He is silent out of wisdom. Because there are lessons that can only be learned when He is silent, and it is not easy to admit this, I know. But it is in silence that the most profound transformation happens. Think about it. When everything around you makes noise, what do you hear first? Distractions. But when everything goes silent, you start to listen to yourself, and in that inner space, God works. It's as if He was saying, now that the world has gone silent, I can talk to you. And then the process begins. Painful? Yes. But necessary, because transforming hurts, changing hurts, growing hurts. God, like every good father, knows that there are times when an immediate response would weaken us. Because we have become accustomed to depending on clear signs, on external confirmations, and we forget that faith does not depend on noise, it depends on conviction. Silence forces you to dig deeper. It reveals whether you trust in God or just His blessings. Look, when a teacher gives a test, he doesn't talk. He's already taught you. He keeps quiet so that you can reveal what you've learned. With God, it's the same. His silence is not a punishment, it's an assessment. It's a planned pause, so that you can discover strengths you didn't even know you had. And in this pause, He is more present than ever, even if you don't realize it. Want to know what to do in the silence? First, don't panic. Breathe. Understand that this is a time for refinement. Second, go deeper. Read the Bible more. Pray. Sincerely write down your doubts. Don't run away from God because of His silence. Get closer. Because right now, He is molding you, healing old wounds, removing debris from your heart. He is preparing you for something greater, and don't be fooled into thinking that you're the only one going through this. Great spiritual leaders, prophets, even Jesus experienced God's silence. On the cross, He cried out, "Father, why have you forsaken me?" And yet, heaven remained silent. But 3 days later, the entire story was transformed. Silence prepares the resurrection. So when God seems quiet, understand, He is working in the unseen. He is silently building what you will experience in evidence. And the transformation He plans begins there, when you choose to trust, even without understanding. It is this kind of faith that He honors. It is this silent trust that moves the supernatural. There are people who spend their lives waiting for things to just happen, for time to solve them, for God to do everything by Himself. But let me tell you something that may be uncomfortable to hear. Your life is, in large part, where it is today because of the decisions you made or didn't make. It's that simple. And if you keep waiting for the world to turn for you, you'll just stand still while time passes by. Making decisions is risky, I know. Every decision carries fear, insecurity, doubt, but it also carries power. Every choice is a seed, and what you plant today determines what you will reap tomorrow. The Bible is full of examples of this. Moses decided to face Pharaoh. Joshua decided to trust even in the face of giants. Stephen decided not to deny his faith, even under rocks. What about you? What have you decided? Many people talk about destiny as if it were something fixed, unchangeable. But the truth is that God has a plan, and you have the choice. He gives you directions but doesn't push you. He opens doors but doesn't drag you through them. It's your decision to enter or not. Free will is a gift and also a great responsibility. Because the path you choose determines where you will end up. And here comes an important detail. Not deciding is already a decision. When you put off that difficult conversation, when you avoid facing that addiction, when you ignore that calling, you are, in practice, choosing to continue the way you are. And this also has consequences. Your spiritual, emotional, relational life, everything is shaped by your choices. Want something practical for today? Make a list of decisions you've been putting off. You don't have to resolve everything right now, but write them down. Seeing what's pending is the first step to taking action. Then pray about each item. Ask for clarity, peace, courage, and then start, one by one. Slowly, but firmly. Because when you move with faith, God moves with you, and you know what's most beautiful? Even if you've made bad decisions in the past, God can still transform your path. He doesn't cancel your story because of bad choices. But you need to decide to start over. He redeems, rebuilds, restores, but He doesn't force it. The initiative is yours. Heaven is ready, and it's waiting for a simple yes from you. Your transformation doesn't just depend on what you feel. It depends on what you do, and what you do starts with a decision, no matter how small it may seem, no matter how scary it may seem. Sometimes the difference between a frustrated life and a life full of purpose is that email you never sent, that prayer you keep putting off, that door you refuse to open out of fear. So what is missing for you to decide? Fear will always be around, doubt too, but you can choose to move forward despite them. Because when you decide with faith, destiny changes and you don't walk alone anymore. Most people think that courage is that grand, almost heroic feeling that invades your chest and makes you jump without thinking. But let me dispel this myth right away. True courage is not the absence of fear. It is acting in spite of fear. It's taking a step even when your legs are shaking. It's trusting God even when the situation tells you to stop. That's courage. And that's exactly what He expects from you. The thing is, we're used to seeing courage in movies, with inspiring soundtracks, epic twists, and a cinematic ending. But real life is different. Here, courage is shown when you get out of bed on a day when everything seems heavy, when you forgive someone who hurt you, when you decide to let go of what's holding you back, even if you're not sure what comes next. It's in these actions that courage reveals itself. Simple, raw, real. And why does this matter so much? Because the transformation that God wants to make in your life requires action. And every action to get off the ground needs courage. Faith without action becomes theory. Promises without action become frustration. And dreams without steps become just in time. God doesn't want you to just believe. He wants you to act based on what you believe. Remember Gideon? That guy who thought he was weak, incapable, the smallest of the smallest tribe? Well, that's right. God called him brave before. He even believed it, because heaven doesn't define you by what you feel, but by what you decide. And even though he was afraid, Gideon acted. He followed the call, and then God went with him. Result? An improbable victory, impossible in human eyes, but completely possible in the eyes of God. Faith. Want some practical advice? Don't wait until you feel confident to start. Start even when you're insecure. Don't wait for your fear to disappear before obeying. Obey even when you're trembling. Because courage is born in action. Each step taken with faith will shape a brave heart, and little by little you will realize that fear no longer controls you. It may even accompany you, but it no longer guides your steps. And don't think that being brave means never failing. It means trying, starting over, facing things. Courage is when you start dreaming again after a disappointment. It's when you talk about God even when you're embarrassed. It's when you take that first step that no one sees, but that changes everything inside you. You might even think, but what if I fail? What if it doesn't work out? What if I can't handle it? Do you know what the answer is? What if It works. What if you discover strengths you didn't even know you had? What if because of an act of courage, God unlocks a new season in your life? The truth is, courage is a muscle. The more you use it, the stronger it gets. So stop waiting until you feel ready. God doesn't want your feelings. He wants your decision. Because it's when you move with courage that He moves with power. And that's when the impossible starts to feel natural. There is a dangerous myth that many people carry inside themselves without even realizing it. A thought that whispers in the back of their minds, "It's not the right time yet." And so we wait. We wait for the money to appear, the fear to disappear, the certainty to come, the support to arrive. We wait for everything to align, for the sky to open, for courage to magically appear. But let me tell you with all the love and confidence, the ideal moment rarely exists. And when it does, it's because you decided to create it. Life is not a movie where the protagonist receives the perfect signal at the perfect time, with the perfect music in the background. Reality is more raw, more unpredictable, and it is precisely in this imperfection that God acts with more force. Because He's not waiting for your life to get sorted out before He can use you. He's waiting for you to say, "Even though it's messy, I'm going." And then, my friend, everything changes. How many things have you put off living while waiting for the ideal moment? That course you didn't start because you thought it was too late. That apology you didn't make because you were waiting for the right moment. That step of faith you put off because you wanted to feel more prepared. The truth? You'll never feel completely ready. But God doesn't need a ready you, He needs a willing you. Just look. Noah built the ark without ever seeing rain. Abraham left home without knowing where he was going. Mary said yes to the angel without having any guarantees. None of them waited for the right time. They listened to the call, trusted, and acted. That's why they were marked in history. And that's exactly why you can be marked too, when you decide to stop waiting for the perfect moment and start obeying in the now. Want a practical exercise? List something you've been putting off for months, maybe years. Now imagine that you finally started doing it today. Visualize the impact of it 6 months from now. Now think. Why keep putting off something that could transform your life? What's the real gain in waiting any longer? There is a saying that goes, the best time to plant a tree was 20 years ago. The second best time is now. And with the decisions in your life, with your faith, with your transformation, it's the same thing. The more you put it off, the further you get from what God has in store. And worse, the easier it becomes to settle. Because the comfort zone is a subtle trap, comfortable but paralyzing. And here's a spiritual tug on your ear with all the love. Stopping because of the fear of making a mistake is the surest way to never get it right. God didn't call you to be perfect, He called you to move. And if you stumble, He will pick you up. If you falter, He will teach you. But if you don't move, not even He can push you. So don't wait any longer. Not for the ideal sign, not for the ideal force, not for the ideal situation. Wait for God, and He has already said, the time is now. Don't waste any more days trying to control what only faith can access. Because the ideal moment is not a place you find. It is a place you build with courage, step by step. If there is one lie that needs to be exposed today, it is this one. I need to be perfect for God to use me. This idea has held so many people back, silenced so many voices, paralyzed so many lives. But let me remind you of something that can completely change the way you see yourself. God is not looking for perfection. He is looking for willingness. The entire Bible is a parade of imperfect people who were called by God. Moses stuttered. David was an adulterer. Jonah ran away from his mission. Peter denied it. Paul persecuted. And Gideon, oh Gideon, he felt like the smallest, the weakest, the most unlikely. But do you know what God did? He called each one of them. And not after they were ready, but while they still felt incapable, because ability does not come before the calling. It is born along the way, together with faith and obedience. And you, how many times have you thought that you weren't good enough? How many times have you looked in the mirror and only seen flaws, limitations, baggage from the past? Do you really think that God is surprised by your mistakes? He already knows all of them, including the ones you're yet to make. And yet, He decided to call you. That alone says everything about who He is and who you can be. God uses real people, people who have fallen, made mistakes, and felt inadequate. He takes what the world despises and transforms it into a powerful instrument. But there is one condition. You need to say yes, not a yes with a perfect resume, nor with a whole life sorted out. A sincere yes with a willing heart, even if your hands still shake. You know what? When God chooses someone imperfect, He reveals the grace of Him, because what shines is not performance but presence. When someone sees you being used by God, even with your limitations, that person understands that it is the work of heaven, not a human construction. This glorifies God much more than any appearance of plastic and untouchable holiness. Want a practical step? Start today exactly as you are. Talk to God in a simple way. Say, Lord, I don't know how, but I want to. Write it down if you need to. Pray it, declare it, and then pay attention, because He will start using your weaknesses as bridges to reach other people. He will show you that even your pain has a purpose, that even your crooked story can straighten the paths of others. Remember that Gideon only believed what God said after he obeyed. He felt like a coward, but God called him brave even before the battle, and it is the same with you. He already calls you strong, light, and an instrument, even if you still feel like you are in pieces. So stop hiding behind the excuse of, I'm not good enough yet. God knows exactly who you are, and yet, or perhaps because of that, He who chose you, imperfect, yes, but in His hands completely capable. Now that you've been on this profound journey of faith, calling, courage, and transformation, I need to ask you a direct question. What are you going to do with all this? Because let's face it, content without action becomes just another inspiration that evaporates the next day. And you didn't get here by chance. Something inside you already knows that it's time to move on. So, think carefully. What decision are you putting off? What step of faith do you need to take even without all the guarantees? What pain are you still trying to hide from God, as if He doesn't know? You don't have to have all the answers. You just have to be willing to start, even scared, even insecure, even imperfect. God does not expect your perfection. He expects your surrender. And here's a challenge. Don't end this reading like you would close a book. Use it as a starting point. Pray about everything you read. Meditate, write it down, share it with someone who also needs to hear it. And most importantly, just because faith only becomes transformation when it becomes movement. If this made sense to you, subscribe to the channel, activate notifications, and follow the next content. This journey doesn't have to and shouldn't be a lonely one.